Hello guys, welcome to the Chess for Knights lecture slash class slash stream. Today my name is Dariusz. I'm gonna show some interesting and classical game from the past, played by Robert James Fischer, world champion. But before we do that, I just wanted to show some two positions which will basically describe the entire theme of what we're gonna be talking today about. And so this is the position number one I want to talk about. It's called intro one. I named it intro one, and basically I want to discuss today such strategical sort of aspect slash feature as a very strong knight versus bad bishop. So in this position, this is one of the example positions that I basically completely made up. It's not for any game. In this position, white has huge advantage, and it's based on first of all this very strong knight and this very bad bishop. And this bishop is very constricted, like very restricted. Can't really go anywhere. All of the black pawns, apart from f7 and h7, are on the dark squares, which basically makes this piece very defensive piece, and they can't do really much in the game. And while this knight on f5 has lots of possibilities of maneuvering around, regrouping pieces. And this knight can come here, for instance. Sorry, not on e5 but to d5. For instance, on the light squares, white can go like this. For instance, if this knight comes from gets to d5, white can basically play rook b7. There are lots of ideas here for white. While black is basically restricted to only defense. So, for instance, one possible move here for white is to play rook b7. Basically putting some more pressure on black, and the black is forced basically to just stay in place and not do anything, because otherwise it will just drop immediately material. Let's say rook a8, white can play with the king, for instance, and if the rook comes here to a2, let's say, then rook b8 already wins the piece. So black is forced to basically defend passively here, and white can just do, to be honest, nearly whatever, and white can win the game just by improving pieces. Let's say knight e3, knight to d5, then king comes here, just grabbing this f6 pawn, surrounding this pawn and getting it. So there are ideas like this, and it's all based. The major thing is that this is based on this very strong knight on f5 and very bad bishop on f8. In case in this position, let's say it was white to play, but white plays this, and this bishop was not dark square bishop but light square bishop on e6, then it would cover its kind of knight d5 or knight f5. It would take either on d5 or on f5, but with light square bishop. But the thing is that the dark square bishop is basically restricted by its own pawns, and white's knight has a sort of free play on all around the board, and it's a huge advantage. So this is what I'm going to be talking about today, and I'll show another example of this before showing Fischer's game, and one modern example of the same idea, which is very instructive as well. Let me get to the intro, second example, which is this position. Give me a second. It's this position, and here. In this position, it's, as you guys can see, it's very similar to the previous position. Only difference is that it is light square bishop and very weak dark squares. While this knight on e5 is a very strong piece, obviously, and this bishop on e6 is terrible. Like, it's surrounded, it's hitting its own pawns. It's basically forced to only defense. And in case it's white to play, white can win in basically, I think, two ways, or possibly even more, but the easiest one of the two moves I would consider here is either king d6 or king b6. Both moves are looking just crushing on it, to be honest. And why? Because here this bishop is forced to defend all the pawns and can't basically attack any of white's pawns, while this knight can maneuver around, can regroup, let's say d3, and then go to c5 and hit this pawn. And it's very, very difficult for black to face it. The only possibly move is king b8, knight c5, bishop c8. But then slowly black will run out of moves, because this domination of this knight over this bishop is just like overwhelming. So having these two positions in mind, I wanted to discuss one of the most famous games played by Fischer, Robert James Fischer, in 1959, I believe. It was interzonal versus Julio no, sorry, that was 1962. It was against Julio Bolbochán, and in this game, Fischer beautifully outplayed his opponent and employed those ideas of very strong knight versus very bad bishop, and it's sort of like a classic game that basically everyone should know. So let's look at it and see how Fischer outplayed his opponent. So this is it. Let me just make sure. Yeah. All right. So this was e4, and in here Bolbochán played c5, knight f3, d6, d4, takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, Najdorf with h3, which Fischer used to employ quite often. He also played very often bishop c4, but h3 as well. And here there is, of course, modern theory basically goes like e5, there is move e5, e6, g6 is also possible. Knight c6, Bolbochán's choice, is also possible, but it's a little bit like less accurate, it's considered, I think. G4, and played Fischer. And right now, I think the main move, the best try for black is to play queen b6 in here, trying to kick this knight from d4, but Bolbochán played knight takes d4, which is the beginning of very flawed idea. In general, you're not supposed to take on, like, trade if you are not forced to trade. You should, if white wanted to trade the knights, then knight takes c6, b6 would be in black's favor, and while taking on d4 is not necessarily in black's favor. So trading pieces like this doesn't really make much sense. But anyway, queen b6 sort of is better move, but knight takes d4, it was the beginning of the flawed idea that Bolbochán had in mind, because it's very forced. Queen takes d4 and e5. And this is serious mistake, this entire idea, simply because right now, as you guys can see, this pawn structure, this pawn on e4 constricts those pawns d6 and e5, and this d5 square suddenly becomes available for white's knight, and we will see later in the game that this was basically the beginning of all black's trouble in this game, and this is why black has lost this game. And Fischer's technique was, by the way, brilliant. Possibly here it was already better to play something like h6, which is already very shaky for black, but it was already much better than playing e5, simply because it just doesn't give away like squares just like that. But okay, e5 was played by Bolbochán, queen d3, logical, just retrieve the queen, bishop e7, g5, hitting the knight, knight d7, bishop e3, perfect. And here knight c5 was played by Bolbochán. It's not a great move in my opinion, simply because this knight is supposed to sort of fight this knight on c3. This knight is supposed to fight this knight on c3. So if this knight is definitely coming to d5 at some point, black should try to make some attempt to make sure maybe knight goes to b6 or something like this, rather than to c5. That's why I would rather consider playing maybe here in this position b5, with idea bishop b7, rook c8, maybe the knight b6, something like this. However, position is definitely very shaky for black. It was probably better to play like this. But anyway, Bolbochán played knight c5, queen d2, bishop e6, a long castle, a short castle, everything normal, both sides are developing their pieces. F3, rook c8, king b1, and here here Bolbochán made major mistake again, knight d7, and basically usually you're not supposed to just come back with the pieces unless they are attacked too, and like, you know, putting all the pieces on the back rank, like going backwards. Usually you should go forward, and here Bolbochán decided to go backwards. Maybe his idea was to play knight b6, but like in the first place then he played knight c5. It's kind of like wasting time. So therefore in here, if while black already played knight c5, you know, black should try to kind of like create some queenside attack. Let's say play b5, which is much more logical, and knight a4, and this was way more sensible rather than just coming back knight d7, because here at least there are some hopes for, let's say, counterplay. And if we trade the knights, then suddenly this 5 square is not a problem anymore. So here for sure white should play knight d5 with advantage, but at least knight on a4 creates some, let's say, danger to white's king. You know, this knight on a4 maybe creates some danger to white's king, so it's not so clear, not entirely clear. However, with correct play by this should be much better anyway. But for instance, knight takes e4 would be a huge mistake suddenly, because right now white doesn't have control over d5 square anymore, and this knight doesn't come to d5. So it's suddenly position gets really unclear, and who knows what's going on. So coming back to this position, king b1, Bolbochán played this mistake, knight d7, h4, bishop b5, and now bishop h3 was played by Fischer. And this is a very strong move, because the idea is that the only defender of this d5 square is this bishop. So if we trade that bishop with this, trade those light square bishops, we can basically occupy this d5 square with the knight, and then we will see basically that this knight versus this bad bishop on e7 will tell in the future that, you know, like it's will show its kind of like superiority in the future, this knight versus this bishop. So, but first we need to trade those bishops. And here Bolbochán simply, I've my opinion, didn't understand what was going on, and he simply took on h3. So, and this was big mistake, because black he voluntarily just gave up this bishop rather than well, instead he should just keep it in any case, because for instance if he played something like rook b8, for instance, rook b8, and here okay, this is basically trying to get out of this diagonal, because this bishop is very strong. It's getting this rook out of there, maybe preparing b4 or something like this. And here if white wanted to take on e6, then f takes e6, and suddenly this d5 square is not anymore available to this knight, because pawn on e6 and pawn on e6 basically covers d5 square and opens all. After f takes e6 also black hits on f3, so it's not so clear anymore. So this was I think correct way to react to bishop h3. Of course white doesn't have to take on e6, and correct move is possibly just knight d5, and if knight bishop takes d5, queen d5, white is still huge advantage, but the difference is that at least here this knight on d5 is not dominating over this bishop on e7. So here of course black is in big trouble still, but you know, maybe knight b6 is some chance, and if queen comes back, knight c4. If bishop takes b6, well, at least, of course, position is still bad because the bishop on e7 is terrible, but at least not dominate over this knight by this knight on d5. And also, different color bishops maybe create some chances in long perspective that black can maybe escape for a draw by trading all the pieces in some leaving only lights different color bishops and trying to make a draw in different color bishop endgame, even like if it's pawn down or something like that. So this was correct defense. But after bishop h3, which was definitely a mistake, suddenly this knight comes to d5 completely unopposed. So here played knight, Bolbochán played knight b6, I do at knight c4, but obviously right now bishop takes b6. I'm not sure whether it was already anything better, because otherwise knight d5 comes either way to d5. So at least he managed to trade some pieces, but knight d5 right now and queen d8. And as you we finally got to the position where basically what I wanted to talk about, how we got to this position, and what are basically the main ideas how to proceed from here with white, because the way Fischer won this game is very, very instructive. First of all, I wanted to discuss whether white can maybe grab the pawn on d6. So basically it's sort of like when I was a kid, I remember I was curious sort of whether white was maybe white can just trade his bishop on e7 and take on d6, because knight takes e7, queen e7, queen takes d6. Seems like we are getting the pawn. And this approach is wrong for two reasons. First of all, it basically fails tactically in this position, because black can play just rook fd8 suddenly, and black is winning because of the back rank issues that white is having. Queen takes d7, rook takes d1 mate. So this is sort of a trap that Bolbochán had in mind, definitely. But what I wanted to talk about this, why this knight takes d7 is wrong, not only tactically because of queen d6, rook d8, but also why is it wrong to take this knight, take this pawn, even considering that there is no rook d8, but let's say only queen takes d6, rook takes d6. Basically, this knight is worth much more than a pawn, than just grabbing the pawn. White can achieve much more by just keeping it, but not by not grabbing this pawn, but by keeping it on this knight on d5 and keep its bishop on e7, and by creating a kingside attack on the black's king. And this is what Fischer did, exactly like that. f4. He played the 4, opening the f file, attack hitting in the center, and opening, expanding on the king side. Opening also the third rank for the rook. Maybe rook a3 will be possible, something like this. So queen takes on f4, queen takes d4, queen d7, hitting the rook. And right now, again, queen f5. This is what Fischer did. And this is a very strong move, because even end games are here, like with the knight on d5 and bishop on e7 are... Okay, first of all, queen f5, knight e7 just wins. So, but even if queen f5, e takes f5 was also definitely is like overwhelming. But here there's this additional trick with knight takes e7. So, but the most important thing is that he doesn't take on e7. He doesn't take this pawn simply because suddenly there could be rook c4 move, and suddenly it's getting really messy. Suddenly white has weak pawn on e4, and white has to defend. And it can get really unclear here. Black can escape for a draw. Let's say rook e3, definitely defending the pawn, but suddenly f5 is maybe possible. You know, guys, it's like very unclear position. Like this is looking very messy, unlike this position, where basically it's clear and obvious that white is definitely winning here, simply because this knight on d5 is dominating over this bishop on e7. So it's just not worth it. The white can really grab the pawn, but it's just not worth it relative to what possibilities white have white has in this game. So this guy played Bolbochán played rook cd8, rook a3, hitting the pawn, queen a7, rook c3, and the rest is basically just perfect technique by Fischer. And like I just want to point out few things here. While showing the game, because it's very instructive how Fischer was not even rushing to take this pawn. Queen g4, queen d7, queen f3, queen e6, rook c7, hitting, entering the 7th rank, rook d8, knight f4, hitting the queen, queen e5, rook d5. Already queen has to go like to h8, which is awful, obviously. And suddenly, of course, there are many moves that win. There's h5 winning. There is, let's say, rook a7 hitting the pawn on a6. Queen a3 could be winning as well. When queen a3, rook d, bishop d8 is not so clear, but like there are many moves that win. Rook c6 as well is possible. Simply coming back with the rook and playing knight d5 back, also possible. Anything basically that you want. But what I really like Fischer's approach here, because he just underlines this kind of bad fate of this bishop, dark square bishop that black has. And if in such position that basically you are strategically winning, it's very good oftentimes to play just simply move like a3. In case any complications happen, just play some such move like a3 just to make a space for your king in any case that position opens up and the there may be some, you know, tactical ideas on the back rank. Just to avoid any sort of ideas like this, just play a3 and have peace of mind. So h6 was played by Bolbochán, but this already tried to activate the queen, but this on the other hand weakens the king. So right now Fischer simply goes after his opponent's king and mates. So let's see how it finished. G takes h6, queen takes h6, h5, opening the king side, bishop g5, h takes g6, pawn takes g6, and queen b3. Very strong move. Basically, as the f7 pawn is not there anymore, this diagonal is open, and this creates tactical ideas on this diagonal of discover check. Rook takes the4 happened in the game, and right now rook e5, also rook g5 was possible, rook f5 was possible, rook d6 was maybe possible as well, but rook e5 is very strong, and it's just mates. So king f8, because otherwise rook on e8 is lost. Rook takes e8, king takes e8. Actually this is where the game ended, simply because their mate followed in few moves. Because after king takes e8, after king takes hold on a second. After king takes e8 here, queen e6 follows, and after king d8 there is queen c8 mate, and after king f8 there is queen f8 and bishop d8, queen d8 mate. So this is how the game ended. And what's really important from this game to take out is that this knight on d5 is a very powerful piece, and it's not worth just a pawn, it's worth much more. It basically creates such paralysis over black's pieces that white can do nearly anything and black cannot react to this, and white can just grab multiple pawns by just having this knight there, and by the fact that black's pieces are so constricted, white can just get much more than just a pawn by trading this knight takes e7, like here for instance. You just see the difference. Like this position, let's say the queen on h8, or what could have been if not then after we take this knight, this bishop with this knight, and suddenly position gets really messy. So it just this knight on d5, such powerful knight, is worth much more than just a pawn. So yeah, this is the most important, in my opinion, intake from this game by Fischer. And I wanted also to show a modern example of the same idea that Fischer employed, and like what I'm talking about with this knight, very powerful knight over this very bad bishop. And this happened actually very lately by my teammate from Pro Chess League, Grigory Oparin, in our match against China Pandas, which unfortunately we lost. But Grigory played beautiful game against Zhao Jun. Like it's very instructive what he did and how he did it, and I was really impressed by this game, I remember. So let's have a look into this game because it's very instructive. So let me pull out this Grigory's game. 1 second. It's here. All right. So he played against Zhao Jun on March 4th, so basically like 10 days ago. So he started knight f3, a little bit different than Fischer started with e4, but it didn't kind of prevent Grigory from getting like such great position. So knight f3, knight f6, g3, b6, d4. We got some queens Indian defense. Bishop g2, bishop b7, castle, all good, all theory. Knight d4, bishop d2, all theory. d6, in my opinion, is a little bit inaccurate move according from theoretical standpoint. Bishop f6, as far as I know, is the best move. However, d6 is relatively playable as well. d5, very strong move in my opinion, basically gaining the space. If you guys looked at my previous lecture about the knights, it was the most important sort of like strategical ideas, basically center was one of those ideas, and basically Grigory takes over the center here. Knight takes d2, knight takes d2, e5, and suddenly e4. And do you guys can see a common theme here? I think you do, because this bishop on e7 suddenly it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's like hitting its own pawns. It's hitting its own pawns. Bishop, let's say bishop to d6, and if he goes to f6, all those pawns basically are in the way of this bishop. So it's hard to improve it, and it's basically the source of all the problems that black face later in the game. So knight d7 happened in the game, queen e2, normal move, g6, bishop h3. As you guys remember, Fischer played very similar move in the game, bishop h3 with the bishop on e6. Right now, Grigory played bishop h3, and there is no bishop on this diagonal yet, so we can't trade it yet, these light square bishops. But this bishop on b7 has, because of the strong center that white has no way of coming back to the game rather than bishop c8. And after, if it comes to c8, then basically will be traded for this bishop, and this is definitely in white's favor, because this leaves this bishop completely out. Like there will be only piece of only bishop that black has, and if we even then manage to trade knights, then this bishop will be even worse, because of all the light control of the light over the light squares that white will have. And let's see what happened in the game. Bishop c8, b4, h5, a4, and right now Zhao Jun made a major mistake in my opinion. He played h4, which is basically completely unnecessary in my opinion, because if this rook on, if black didn't castle yet, this rook one would be on h8. If there was no castle on the king side, this would be on h8, and maybe it will be some, let's say, pressure on the h file for this bishop. But right now it's just kind of like pushing pawn forward and just trading it for the h4 pawn for this, maybe I should put yellow, h4 pawn for h2 pawn after hg. So it doesn't really change anything in the position, so it's kind of like waste of time without the rook on h8. So I don't really see what was Zhao Jun's idea here, but in my opinion the best move here was a5, and on the contrary, with black try to gain control over the c5 score. Let's say b takes a5, rook takes a5, and then knight c5 maybe. Of course, white the knight will never get there easily, because white can play knight b3, and still white is slightly better here. But position is, you know, way more balanced. At least black already managed to trade some pawns here and disrupt the pawn structure that white has. So h4 happened in the game, which was a mistake. And now a5, obviously, h takes g3, h takes g3 doesn't, as I said, it doesn't really change anything. Also f takes g3 was worth attention, but again, no need for that in my opinion. So h takes g3, knight f6. One way or another, black will have to play this move sooner or later, simply because otherwise how will black play with, you know, his pieces? There is no basically easy way to develop them. And let's say king g7 just, you know, could be whether king g2, rook h8, rook h1, doesn't really change anything. Either way, knight f6 will be coming at some point. So knight f6 happened right now, bishop takes c8, queen takes c8, king g2, king g7, rook h1, queen d7, all normal moves. And right now I really like the move that Grigory played, a6. The idea behind this move is that it fixes the structure on the queen side, and this pawn on a7 is suddenly becoming a weakness. And with this pawn on a6 and the vacant b5 square, this knight can come to b5 and basically hit this pawn on a7 and restrict this rook on a8 to simply just only defending this pawn on a7. So in case of the rook trades on h file, let's say, which because rook h file is open, so let's say it can happen that suddenly white will play rook h3, rook h1, and then while black will want to trade rook h8. For instance, I'll just make some random moves here just to show what I'm trying to say. Let's say if black plays some move like, I don't know, rook g8 for instance, white plays this, some random move, rook h1, and suddenly rook h8, because it's getting dangerous. Suddenly it may get really ugly for black, simply because knight b5, and there are difficulties with this pawn, and all because white put this pawn on a6, which creates huge problems. Of course, right now in this example, black has queen c8, which this pawn, so white should prepare it somehow better. But like as an idea, it gets really tricky for black with this pawn on a6 as general rule of thumb. So it's always good to play this move a6. And Zhao Jun, I think he realized all the dangers in his positions. That's why he tried to react in the center by undermining white's center, c6. Queen d3, rook c8, d takes c6, queen takes c6, all good. Rook a c1, rook a8. I mean, if you have to play rook a8 here, and because of this knight b5, you know, sort of threat is being so strong, it means it's just not a good position. And as you guys can see, after c6 here played, d takes c6, queen takes c6, rook a c1, suddenly we have very similar structure to what was in the game of Fischer versus Bolbochán. This knight on d5, the square on d5 is vacant again, and bishop on e7 is really bad. And if we can get a knight to trade one pair of knights and get this knight to d5, if we can just make those knights disappear from the board and knight comes to d5, it's basically exactly the same thing what happened in the Fischer's game. So this would be perfect idea, perfect plan for Grigori, in my opinion. So let's see what he was doing. He played knight d5 immediately, which I'm not sure whether it was the best move here, because on the other hand, he could have just played knight f1. And knight e3, knight d5 is a very powerful idea that is actually typical, because in lots of Sicilians it happens very often, knight f1, knight d3, knight d5. So if he played this, he would have had like huge advantage. After knight d5, I'm not entirely convinced how big his advantage is, but still an advantage, definitely. Queen d7, simply because right now instead of d5 square, he has c6 square. And b5 square is still vacant for this knight, so if he can bring this knight here, it's still definitely big advantage. But it would be having better if he had also underscore d5. So it's debatable. In my opinion, it would be better to play knight f1, but it was his choice. So let's see what happens. Knight f3, rook h8, b5. Okay, he decides to have only b5, so only c6 square for his pieces, which is also definitely enough if you can somehow exploit the c6 square, so it would be great. So rook h1, rook h1, rook c8. It's logical, basically trying to control the c file. And there were some issues with king h1 simply because there would be rook h8 or something like this, king g1 and queen h3, and there are some suddenly huge issues on the h files. That's why he was forced to take with queen h1 mate. Basically, it's just unstoppable, I think. So rook h1 was sort of forced move. Rook c8, and this was a good try by Zhao Jun, simply because right now black controls the c file. That's why white has to get get the rook back to the c file somehow in order to fight for this file, and that black doesn't get a counterplay, because if black gets counterplay with queen rook c5, suddenly this pawn b5 can become a weakness. That's why I really like the next move, queen e3, that Grigori played, because he threatens queen h6 mate, and also there is strategical idea, not rook b1 but rook c1, and trying to trade those rooks. And as I said in the beginning, or like coming back to the intro positions, in those positions there were basically knight versus versus queen, knight versus bishop, and in those positions knight was completely dominant piece, and this is what is white aiming for here. If white can trade all the pieces and leave like all the heavy pieces, namely rook and queen, and leave just knight versus the bishop, white's position will be certainly winning, simply because this bishop is so constricted still by its own pawns, plus there are other pawns on dark squares on b6 and a7, while which and a7 still remains a weakness. So right now he had like he had possibility to play bishop f6, which was, I think, much better defense than what he did in the game. But he played king g8, which is very difficult. It was also rapid game, so it's difficult to gauge what to do, because definitely rook c5 is a loss, is losing because of queen h6 is just mate, and queen h8 next. So he had to react somehow, and basically it was hard decision whether to bishop f6 or king g8. King g8 is more natural because you're just grinding out of the check on h6. And right now I really like Grigori's move because it's rook c1, and now we are trading these pieces, those rooks, and all the active play that black might have had is basically gone. So he played king g7 and now rook c6, and the white rook occupies the c6 square. And this is basically nearly game over. Rook h8, hitting on queen h3, so just knight g1 to just make sure that we don't get mated. bishop d8, and his technique was also really nice. Queen f3, bishop d8, queen e2, bishop g5, queen f3 back, move around a little bit, queen c2, of course no draw, rook h5, trying maybe play f5 or something, not really sure what it does, rook h8, rook c8 was a really good move, because right now black wants to play queen c6 even, sometimes. So rook h8, rook a8, very strong move, hitting on a7 pawn, maybe creating also a threat of queen c8 right now if we want to trade queens. So Zhao Jun played bishop c7, and the idea is that rook a7 may not have been so clear. I don't really get it, why he can take pawn. Also, but probably rook a7 wins, but yeah, definitely should be winning as well. But the thing is, he doesn't even have to do this. The idea is that rook takes h8, queen takes h8, king takes h8, and queen c6 is just so dominating that there is no even necessity to take this pawn on a7 like this. It is winning, yes, but there is no even necessity for that, because rook takes h8, king takes h8, queen c6 is just completely winning. Because if we trade queens, suddenly this square on d5 becomes vacant again. Knight can come here. This is a good thing about knight, that it can just jump around all those squares, while bishop is basically constricted to only 32 squares on the board. Yeah, and also b takes c6 is possible, and with idea of coming with this knight to b5. Knight c3 and knight b5. So it's also possible, depending what you like more. Both are winning. So queen d8, he didn't want to trade queens, but there is no way basically that he can kind of survive this, because queen b8, funny, he has to trade queens. Queen takes b8, rook bishop b8, and right now this is just brilliant. As you guys can see over the next couple of moves, this knight simply is headed towards the c6 square, and black cannot do anything about it. And if this knight comes to c6, then bishop on b8 will either have to move to c7 because it will be lost, and then knight takes a7, or king will have to come to support this bishop, but then it will be, both pieces will be forced to defend on the king side, on the queen side I mean, while white will be able to open the king side and just win the game on the king side. And this is what happened in the game. It's very instructive. Knight d2, here we go. King g7, knight c3, knight c1 I mean, king f6, knight d3, king e8, knight b4, king d7, knight c6, knight came to c6, and this is just game over. This is again dominant knight versus the very bad bishop. Forced to defend this pawn on a7. So king c7, and right now just, you know, opening the king side, f4, and this is just game over. Just game over completely, because white has all the moves on the king side, who just, you know, can go with the king here, and it's just winning, just completely winning. Basically, it's like white is playing with just sole king versus all the pawns, and there is nothing that black can do here, because of this king is forced to defend this bishop, and this bishop, this bishop is forced to defend this pawn. So it's complete paralysis, basically. So in the game happened f6, and right now Grigory played f5, and his opponent took on f5. In case of g5, of course, we cannot never play here g4, because suddenly it could be a draw. Still there are some chances, because these pawns are so weak, there could be some chances for to win, but basically just king f3, this is what I was saying. King f3 is just much stronger, and king g4, king h5, king g6, just kings, the white's king is coming to the black's camp, and just collects on f6, collects on g5, promotes all the pawns, because this is still not moving anywhere, still not going anywhere. So Zhao Jun played took, Grigory took, king c8, g4, king c7, and right now he could have just played anything, but the very simple solution was actually right now to take, because it's just king takes b8 and g5, and basically the pawns, the king is too far of the king side, the pawns on the king side, and that's how the game is concluded. Basically, here Zhao Jun resigned. So it was a perfect game by Grigory, and we were still fighting then against China Pandas in Pro Chess League. but eventually we lost them the entire match. But this game was really, really beautiful and instructive, and it goes along with the theme that was of the powerful and dominant knight versus the very bad bishop. And the same thing happened in the Fischer's game. The same thing happened here. So it just says that in certain positions, when the knight can dominate over the bishop, you should try to exploit that and for your advantage, and just make sure that you don't trade this bishop for just a pawn, because very likely it will be worth much more than just a pawn. For instance, here it was all equal material. It's all equal material, but because of the paralysis that this knight causes for black's pieces, like for instance, if there was no the c6 square, this pawn would be here on d7, position would be completely different, because this knight wouldn't get to c6, because pawn on d7 would be basically covering the c6 square, and then this bishop can activate itself, for say, on c5 somehow. But in this pawn position with pawn on d6, it's just winning for white. So I hope it was instructive, and that's all I have for today on this theme. So it will be it for today, and thank you guys, and until next time.